month
front of
to, I
it.
mean, I'm not.
Okay, Commissioners, we're going to start with item number 8, application for a certificate of appropriateness at 125 to 127 East 93rd Street in the expanded Carnegie Hill Historic District, docket number 16-1696, block 1522, lot 12. A neo-medieval style apartment building designed by George F. Pelham and built in 1924. This is an application to establish a master plan governing the future replacement of windows.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Reba Ashby, Preservation Staff. Welcome back. This item is 125 East 93rd, which is a master plan for the future replacement of windows. Just briefly, it didn't meet the rules because it does not match a historic 6/6 configuration. They're proposing a 1/1 replacement. So Peter Folsom from Panorama Windows is here to elaborate and answer any questions you may have. So I'll
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Pleasure to appear before you, Chairwoman Aspadco. Thank you very much. This is a nice little mid-block building. It's not very large. It's on a lot that's 50 by 100, kind of behind the more impressive 1185 Park Avenue. It has 9 floors. There are about 26 families that live in the building. As you know, the district was established in 1980. And the building went co-op in 1980. The windows were replaced. They're basically early 80s. And there have been no windows replaced since the building, the district was established. The board got together and decided that they would like to put in place a master plan for windows. They'd like to keep as much of a cohesive look as they can in the building. And they thought that would be a good idea. They are, however, proposing to change for future installations the panning to put a panning in that actually mimics the little bit of brick molding that was found on one of the master frames down in the basement window. All the windows that have been replaced except for the fire windows and the stairwells, a couple bulkhead windows, and one window in the basement that just has a piece of plexiglass in it. There really is not a lot that I can tell you about the building because you've seen so many like it before. You can see the designation photo, you can see the historic photo. In the historic photo, we had to look very, very closely to see if in fact they were 6/1s or 6/6s. You can clearly see that there are a couple 6/6s. I think that the community board thought that they were 6/1s, and I believe probably that their letter will reflect that they will be urging your approval for 6/1s instead of 1/1s. But we believe that the building was originally intended for 6/6s. This is what the building would look like if they were 6/6s. There are doubles and singles in the front. The masonry openings for the doubles are about 84 inches wide by 72 high. The single windows are 40 by 72. Nothing really terribly remarkable about it, but it is a nice, clean building. This is the existing condition. There are 4 single light windows, and the rest, as you can see, are all 1/1s. This is what the proposed master plan would be with all 1/1s. I believe that the back were 1/1s, but it's very difficult to tell because there's no photographic record of it. The only windows that you can see from 94th Street are these windows along here, little bathroom windows that are 20 by 48 inches wide. The rest of the courtyard it's hugged up pretty closely to 131 next door. 131 also has 1/1 double hung windows. They've all been changed. This would be what we think are the original condition, the wood double hung windows. The middle, of course, is what is there now, and the ones on the right would be what we're proposing. Obviously keeping the non-structural wood mullions. This would be the proposed condition. It's hard to see, but there's a little bit of the little detail in the brick molding here. This would actually be the panning section. It has a step, a little bit nicer shadow line. It would do a little something to the building, but not make it so that where some windows are replaced, it would make the building unharmonious. And that's really all I have. If you have any questions.
Any questions?
I'm try to answer.
All right, yes, Roberta?
So did you consider the 6/6 at all? Or there are no windows now with 6/6?
There are no windows now that are 6/6 or 6/1. The building did get together and huddled and had a lot of discussions, and the feeling was unanimously that they would like to keep the 1/1 look. I guess partly for cost, partly because it's not a posh building where people can spend a lot of money, and partly because they wanted the uniformity. They wanted the harmony of what it looked like now. I mean, it's a nice mid-block building.
And Roberta, to kind of elaborate on that, a 6/6 double hung window is not necessarily a typical window configuration for this style of building, which is neo-medieval, so that's something kind of.
No, I was just commenting because it appeared that that's, or you all were saying that it appeared that that's what it was. So while it might not be commonplace kind of building, it probably was this building. But
Yes, it probably was. You're right.
All right, any other questions? Okay, we'll take public testimony. Barbara Zay?
Barbara Zay of the Historic Districts Council. The windows provide much visual interest on this otherwise minimally ornamented building. HDC finds that since documentation exists on the original window configuration, it would be a shame to accept a master plan that would formalize a rather bland intervention. The use of synthetic divided lights for 6/6 windows would not cost much more and would greatly improve the building's overall appearance. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Hall?
Michael Hall, Friends of the Upper East Side. Although there are no original windows remaining at 125 East 93rd Street, Friends feels that the establishment of a master plan for future window replacements is the ideal time to correct previous changes to the building. The original Pelham design employed wood-framed 6/1 double-hung windows, which added to the visual interest of the building. We found the aluminum-framed 1/1 double-hung windows installed in the early 1980s detract from the building's pleasant neo-medieval detailing. Acknowledging this, it would be a shame to pass up the opportunity to set a master plan which would correct this condition, especially as the anticipated life expectancy of the current windows reaches its end, and many windows will require upgrading in the near future. The Preservation Committee at Friends requests that the master plan require 6/1 double-hung windows in order to bring the building back into alignment with the architect's original design intent. Thank you.
Thank you. Christabel Guff?
Christabel Goff for the Society for the Architecture of the City. In many early 20th century apartment buildings like this one, facades were characterized by a sophisticated grid of multi-light windows. There has been a cyclical fashion for unbroken expanses of plate glass. That kind of transparency was the rage in Victorian times, when the fabrication of huge sheets of glass first became commercially feasible, and the tiny divided lights of colonial and Greek revival windows were seen as an obsolete technology. Giant shop windows like those in Ladies' Mile and the 1/1s of our brownstone neighborhoods carried the day. At the dawn of the 20th century, however, such transparency in domestic architecture came to be viewed as tiresome and old-fashioned. Thus, Edith Wharton and Ogden Codman wrote in 1897, "The French, always logical in such matters, are now returning to the old fashion of smaller panes, and in many of the new houses in Paris, where windows at first contained large plates of glass, the latter have since been divided by a network of narrow moldings applied to the glass, apparently the first applied muntins of our time." By mid-century, plate glass had its revival in everything from suburban picture windows to the most avant-garde expressions of modernism. In new buildings, that preference still predominates and it has its place, but not perhaps in the restoration of an earlier protected building. Even if it means that the restoration does not occur all at once, we believe that returning to the original window design in a building of this character is the right thing to do. If the Commission approves a master plan for windows radically different from what the architect intended, it is in effect forbidding restoration, more or less permanently, even now when replacement windows of reasonable quality are readily available in historic configurations. The original windows of 125 East 93rd Street are well documented, and the building would be enhanced by restoring the original grid. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers on this item? Right, we received a resolution from Community Board 8 that has recommended that we disapprove as presented. Recommended disapproval, yes. Would you like to respond?
Yes, please, I
Yes.
would. It is a relatively nice-looking building. It's not elaborate, it's not fancy, but it does have terracotta work at the third floor. It's nicely balanced as it is now between the awning, the terracotta work, and the masonry work at the top of the building. It really is a lovely-looking building, and I don't think that it really needs to have muntins in order to make it look right, in order to make it blend in with the community and be tied in with the historic fabric of the Carnegie Hill District. And I think that the commission could see very nicely that the building does stand on its own as it is and does have the proper adornment as is. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? All right, then we can just close the hearing. Okay. Well, some of you know my feelings about situations like this. I think it's a case where the building designation had already lost its historic windows. It seems that 1/1 windows are in buildings of this style, even though this particular building may historically have had 6/1 or 6/6. And I think that in this particular case, it's a facade which is fairly limited. I know we had a case before where the commission did not want to allow for the master plan for 1/1s, but that was a case where it was very visible because there were two large facades, and it was a very plain facade. I think in this particular case, you have a limited frontage that will be seen, and on top of that, the character and the facade is fairly ornamental as compared to other buildings that we've seen. And so the importance of these windows is also, to some degree, less in the overall presentation of the facade. Other comments or concerns? So I don't have an issue with this master plan, but I know that the commission may have some concerns.
What are your concerns with 6/1?
I think it's not so much my concern with 6/1. What I'm saying is I think it's an appropriate master plan, given that, I guess, the three broad points that I made, which is one, that the windows didn't exist at the time of designation. The second, that the facade is very limited in terms of what we see. So sometimes you have buildings that have a lot more presence on a block, and that in this particular case, it's limited. And in the third, that the facade has other features which are architecturally significant. And sometimes what happens in facades, the windows are very prominent, given that the rest of the building facade may be actually rather plain. But I think in this particular case, there are many features that are celebrated, and so the windows don't take on an importance that sometimes they may in other cases. So in this particular situation, I think that it would be appropriate.
I think another issue that might suggest support for your position is that if we were to suggest a 6/1, and since none of the windows have that now, it could be a generation or more before we see consistency arrived at again in this building.
We didn't actually ask how they intend to use the master plan, whether it's to do them all at one time, or is it apartment by apartment? Because
Right, if the entire thing is being done at, like we saw with Starrett Lehigh or something, they were intending to change all the windows at one time. Can you answer that? Yes.
Yes,
We'll
I
have to,
can.
I think we have to reopen for him to answer. Okay, we reopen the hearing?
So
In a
moved.
second. Okay.
This was proactive. It's not that the building is planning on mass changing the windows. It's that the building wanted to make sure that they did have a consistent plan and that they were planning ahead to the future, so that shareholders would know what they were allowed to do and there wouldn't be a lot of confusion in the future. Thank you.
Concerns? Any concerns?
Under those circumstances, I would tend to agree that it's possible in this building, based on the fact that there are other architectural details from the front of the building. But I think that if it were going to happen at one time, I would definitely say that this is the time to do it all. But I also think that to see it done over several decades is not.
I don't. I think that seeing it done over time is better than not seeing it done at all. So, and I think that the 6/1 does, is in concert with the kind of exactly the features of the building that have been noted are special or interesting. So,
I think that in the past, I've been a fan of the put it back even if it takes a while philosophy. And part of the rationale for that was not necessarily that I felt it looked better or didn't look better, but that this was, part of our job was to try to keep as close as we could to the original design by the architect. And if this architect, if we have evidence that the architect had preferred a 6/6 window, which I think is what the applicant has determined, not 6/1.
I misunderstood.
That I think he noted that the photograph, the tax photo, looks like 6/1, but based on evidence that they have in the building and based on a close analysis of the photographs that they have, that it's actually a 6/6. I mean, I think that yes, this building has more detail than others that we have looked at that have been in a more Georgian-y style, that were kind of more plainer, and therefore might be a better candidate for leaving it as is. But I think from the point of view of consistency, I think it's important to try to stick to that principle. And also, looking at the elevations, there's no question for me that it looks much better, it looks much more cohesive with the mullions.
With what, sorry?
With the mullions, with the 6/6.
Okay, so that's that you wouldn't support it, is that right?
I'd vote no.
Okay, is it, other,
I'm also on the 6/6.
okay, it seems that everybody wants to go to the 6/6. And,
When it,
Here's where it looks like a 1, the lower sash is simply raised up. Summertime, and the window's open.
let me ask a...
I just, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, ask a question, because obviously we don't have we have only a majority for maybe 6/6. Sometimes what we have entertained is just doing the primary facade or doing the street-level windows, rather than requiring the applicant to do all of the windows. So what is the...
Yeah, I thought we were just talking about the street facade when we talked about.
Right, because I think the windows that are not in the street can be done at staff level, so we are only really talking about the
Well,
street
it
level.
depends on some buildings, it's the whole...
Right, and sometimes, right. Right, and I think that, and I understand that the commission may not agree with me on this, but to me, it's not about necessarily bringing it back to what it was, but it's whether this in and of itself is appropriate. And I find it difficult to say that changing the windows that you have right now that have been there since its designation on a facade that has this kind of an ornamentation and has limited frontage, the idea of having one over windows in the context of this historic district, I would find it hard to say that that's not appropriate. It's just, I just don't see how how the commission can take that position that this is somehow inappropriate for windows to change and be 1/1 when that's what we have right now. So I understand that the commission may not agree with that, and I guess that it's some, I don't know.
We said, well, it's an issue of being inappropriate, but one being more appropriate.
But I think that the commission,
The original architect's intent.
right, my feeling is that, and it's maybe our council can comment on about that, but I think the position has been that you can have one thing that's appropriate, you can have something else that's different, that's also appropriate. I think I don't know if it's necessary for the commission to always choose the most appropriate, as long as we can make the determination that what is in front of us is appropriate.
We just allowed major changes to a church, huge changes into the original openings of the windows. But we can't do
In the
this.
case of this church, it's essentially a life or death situation, however. This is a different situation altogether.
Okay, again, I think it's something that this commission will continue to face. And I think one thing to think about is that even when we think about new historic districts and how we designate them and how we regulate them, this is a sticking point for many, many homeowners who do not want to necessarily support being entered into a historic district because of the issue of windows. So it's something as a commission we should think about, even if we do not determine it over here. Okay? All right. So I think we can close the hearing, and we can read into the resolution. I guess the resolution can be, we could do that at staff level. All right, so what action are we taking? We're not taking any action. They can work with staff and they can do their historical.
To return with something else.
Thank you very much.